The research shuttle Aurora shuddered violently as it tore through the atmosphere of Corvanis. Dr. Rebecca Hayes gripped her safety harness while warning lights flashed red across the control panel. The forest moon had looked so peaceful from space with its silver trees and twin suns. Now those same trees were rushing up to meet her dying ship. Emergency systems failing, the computer announced in its calm voice. Impact in 30 seconds. Rebecca closed her eyes and braced for the worst. The crash came like thunder. Metal screamed against stone and earth. The world spun sideways, then upside down, then went completely black. When she opened her eyes again, smoke was rising from twisted metal around her. Her left arm hung at a wrong angle and something warm trickled down her forehead. The shuttle that had been her home for 6 months was now scattered pieces across a clearing she had carved through the forest. Rebecca crawled through the broken door, dragging her injured arm. Emergency supplies lay scattered everywhere. She grabbed what she could carry and stumbled away from the wreckage. The fuel cells could explode at any moment. That was when she heard the growl. It came from deep in the shadows between the silver trees. Low and threatening. Rebecca froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something moved in the darkness. Then another something. And another. The first creature stepped into the sunlight and Rebecca forgot to breathe. It stood nearly 7 feet tall on powerful hind legs. Its body was covered in thick black fur with silver markings along its muzzle and shoulders. The head was wolf-like but larger, with intelligent golden eyes that studied her with careful attention. Its hands ended in sharp claws that could tear through metal. This was a Thyrex. The reports had described them as the dominant species of Corvanis, but seeing one in person was completely different. The creature radiated strength and danger. Every muscle spoke of a predator at the top of the food chain. More Thyrex emerged from the forest. Rebecca counted 8 of them, moving with the coordinated grace of a hunting pack. The largest one, his silver markings indicating age and authority, took a step forward. His lips pulled back to show teeth designed for killing. Rebecca raised her good hand slowly, palm open. "I mean no harm," she said, her voice barely steady. "My ship broke down. I'm not a threat." The pack leader tilted his massive head. His golden eyes showed understanding. He knew her words even if he could not speak them. Intelligence flickered behind those predatory features. These were not simple animals. They were people. A sharp cry echoed through the forest. High-pitched and desperate. Every adult Thyrex went perfectly still. Their ears turned toward the sound like radar dishes. The cry came again, weaker this time. One of their young was in trouble. The pack leader barked something to his companions. The sound was complex, full of meaning Rebecca could not understand. The other Thyrex spread out and moved toward the crying. But the leader stayed, watching Rebecca with suspicion. He would not leave a potential threat alone near his territory. Curiosity overcame fear. Rebecca followed at a safe distance, stepping carefully through the underbrush. The leader allowed it but stayed between her and his pack members. Through the trees, she saw the problem. Her crashing shuttle had carved a path of destruction through the forest. A massive piece of hull plating had smashed through the canopy and brought down several large trees. And trapped beneath one of the fallen logs was a Thyrex cub. The young one was tiny, barely larger than a human child. Its fur was still soft and fluffy, not yet grown into the thick coat of an adult. It whimpered pitifully as it tried to free itself from under the heavy log. The adult Thyrex circled the trapped cub, making distressed sounds. They grabbed the log with their clawed hands and pulled, but it would not move. The angle was wrong. Every time they tried to lift it, the log would shift and press down harder on the cub. Rebecca studied the situation with trained eyes. She had spent years studying engineering before switching to xenobiology. The problem was clear. "Wait," she called out, stepping forward. Every adult Thyrex turned to stare at her. Hackles rose along their necks. The pack leader moved between Rebecca and the trapped cub, his message crystal clear. "Stay back. Do not approach our young." But Rebecca continued talking, pointing at the log. "You are lifting from the wrong place. The weight is uneven. If you try to lift from the heavy end, it will just pivot and crush the cub." She moved slowly, ignoring the warning growls around her. "See here? If we lift from this point instead, the physics will work with us, not against us." The pack leader watched her carefully. Rebecca could see him thinking, processing her words and gestures. Slowly, very slowly, he moved to where she had indicated. "On 3, Rebecca said, positioning herself at the opposite end. 1, 2, 3. Together, human and alien lifted. The log groaned and shifted. For a moment Rebecca thought it would not work. Then suddenly the weight redistributed and the heavy wood rolled away from the trapped cub. The young Thyrex scrambled free and ran to its mother. She gathered the cub close, checking for injuries with gentle touches of her nose. Relief flooded through the entire pack. Rebecca stepped back immediately. She had done what she could. Now she needed to leave before she was seen as a threat again. But as she turned to go, she felt eyes watching her. The pack leader stood perfectly still, staring at her with an expression she could not read. Not hostility anymore. Something closer to confusion. No outsider had ever helped them before. No alien species had ever risked themselves for a Thyrex cub. In all their long history, such a thing had never happened. Rebecca walked back toward her crashed shuttle, leaving the pack to care for their rescued young. Behind her, she heard them talking in their complex language of growls and barks. She wondered what they were saying. She wondered if she would see them again. She did not know that she had just taken the first step toward changing both their worlds forever. 3 weeks had passed since Rebecca's shuttle crashed on Corvanis. Her broken arm was slowly healing in a makeshift sling, and she had built a simple shelter from salvaged metal and forest materials. The clearing where she lived was 2 miles from where she had first met the Thyrex pack, far enough to avoid being seen as a threat. But not far enough to avoid seeing them. Rebecca had learned their patterns without meaning to. The pack moved through their territory like clockwork, changing den sites every few days. It was smart survival strategy. Stay in one place too long and predators would find you. Keep moving and your cubs stayed safe. She had started thinking of the pack leader as Marcus and his mate as Diana. They had 4 cubs between them, plus 3 other adults in their group. The cubs were beautiful creatures, playful and curious when they felt safe. Rebecca watched them from a distance and took notes for the research she might never be able to share. On the morning everything changed. Rebecca was checking her water traps when she saw movement in the forest that did not belong. Large shapes moving with purpose through the trees. But these were not Thyrex. The creatures were bigger and bulkier, covered in brown shaggy fur. Their movements were different too. Less graceful, more brutally direct. Rebecca recognized them from her xenobiology studies. Vorthak. The apex predators of Corvanis. And they were heading straight for where Marcus had established his latest den. Rebecca grabbed her emergency supplies and ran. Her boots crashed through the underbrush as she raced toward the Thyrex territory. Branches tore at her clothes and scratched her skin. Her healing arm throbbed with every step. But she did not slow down. She found the pack just as they were preparing to move to a new location. The cubs played nearby while the adults gathered their few possessions. It was a peaceful scene that would turn into a massacre in minutes. Marcus saw her coming and immediately moved protectively in front of his cubs. His hackles rose and his lips pulled back in a warning snarl. Rebecca was still an outsider. Still potentially dangerous. "Marcus," she called, then pointed back toward the forest. Over the past weeks, she had been practicing Thyrex sounds. Her attempt at their language was clumsy but clear enough. Danger. Predators. Coming this way. The pack leader's ears flattened against his head. He understood. His sharp bark brought every adult Thyrex to full alert. Diana immediately began herding the cubs toward the center of the group while the other adults formed a defensive circle. But they were too late. The first Vorthak burst from the undergrowth with a roar that made the trees shake. The creature was massive, easily 9 feet tall and built like a living tank. Its claws were longer than Rebecca's fingers and its teeth could crush bone. It charged straight at Marcus, who met the attack head-on. The battle was brutal and terrifying. Claws flashed in the morning sunlight. Teeth snapped at throats and limbs. The sounds of the fight echoed through the forest like thunder. 2 more Vorthak appeared from different directions. The pack was surrounded. Diana and the other adults fought desperately to protect their cubs, but they were outnumbered and outweighed. Rebecca watched from behind a tree, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. This was not her fight. She should run while she still could. But when she saw one of the Vorthak break through the defensive line and charge toward the helpless cubs, her body moved without her mind's permission. Her emergency beacon had a high-intensity flash designed for signaling rescue ships. Rebecca activated it and threw it directly into the charging predator's path. The device exploded in brilliant white light just inches from the creature's face. The Vorthak roared in pain and confusion, temporarily blinded. It crashed into a tree instead of the cubs, giving the adult Thyrex time to regroup and drive it back. The battle turned after that. With their surprise advantage lost and one of their number injured, the Vorthak chose to retreat rather than continue the costly fight. They disappeared back into the forest, leaving the pack blooded but alive. Rebecca stayed hidden until she was sure the predators were gone. When she finally emerged from behind her tree, she saw that the victory had come with a price. One of the adult Thyrex was badly wounded. Deep gashes across his shoulder were already showing signs of infection. The injured Thyrex tried to clean his wounds with his tongue, but the cuts were too deep and too awkwardly placed. Without treatment, infection would set in within days. On a world with no hospitals or medicine, that meant death. Rebecca approached slowly, her hands visible and empty. The wounded Thyrex growled when she came near, but Diana barked something sharp at him. It sounded like an order or maybe permission. From her medical supplies, Rebecca produced antiseptic and bandages. The Thyrex endured her touch with obvious discomfort, his muscles tense under her fingers. But he did not pull away as she cleaned and dressed his wounds. When she finished, Rebecca left the remaining medical supplies where the pack could find them. She stepped back and prepared to leave, as she always did. She had helped. Now it was time to go. But as she walked away, she heard Diana calling softly behind her. Not a threat this time. Something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like gratitude. That night, Rebecca found fresh meat outside her shelter. Not scraps or leftovers, but prime cuts from a recent hunt. The kind of meat the pack would normally save for their cubs and elders. The Thyrex had shared their food with her. For the first time in 3 weeks of living on salvaged rations and forest plants, Rebecca ate well. More importantly, she understood what the gift meant. She was no longer seen as a threat or an outsider to be tolerated. She had proven herself in battle. She had protected their cubs when they were in danger. She was beginning to earn their trust. 2 months had passed since the Vorthak attack, and Rebecca's relationship with Marcus's pack had changed completely. They no longer moved away when she appeared at the edge of their territory. Marcus had begun including her in their planning sessions, asking for her thoughts on hunting routes and den locations. She was not quite family yet, but she was no longer a stranger either. The ships appeared without warning on a clear morning. 3 sleek vessels descended through Corvanis's blue sky, their hulls gleaming with the official markings of the Galactic Council. Rebecca's heart sank as she watched them land near the wreckage of her old shuttle. Her emergency beacon, which she had thought broken beyond repair, suddenly crackled to life. Commander Harrison's voice cut through the static with military precision. "Dr. Hayes, this is Council Enforcement Fleet Zeta-7. You are ordered to report for immediate extraction. The native species of this world have been classified as potentially hostile to human interests. All contact is now forbidden." Rebecca stared at the beacon in her hands. Around her, the Thyrex pack had gone completely still. They did not understand the words, but they recognized the tone of authority. It was the same tone humans had used for centuries when talking about beings they considered less than equal. "Commander Harrison," Rebecca replied carefully, "I need more time to complete my research. The Thyrex are not hostile. They are intelligent and peaceful when not threatened. Your research period ended the moment you failed to report in according to schedule. The natives will be relocated to a designated preservation zone for their own safety and the security of future human settlements." Rebecca felt ice form in her stomach. Preservation zone. She knew what that meant. The council would round up the Thyrex like animals, tear apart their family groups, and cage them in some distant corner of their own world. All in the name of protection and progress. She looked at Marcus, at Diana, at the cubs playing at their feet without knowing their entire world was about to be destroyed. The decision was not difficult at all. "I refuse to comply." The silence on the communication channel lasted so long that Rebecca wondered if the signal had failed. Then Harrison's voice returned, cold as the space between stars. "Dr. Hayes, you are now in violation of Council Protocol 847. We are authorized to use any force necessary to secure your return. You have 6 hours to reconsider." Rebecca crushed the beacon under her boot. That evening, she sat with Marcus and tried to explain what was coming. Her Thyrex language skills had improved greatly over the past months, but the concepts were difficult to translate. Ships. Soldiers. Capture. Separation. Cages. Marcus listened with growing anger, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke in careful, heavily accented English. "We fight." Rebecca nodded grimly. "We fight." The council enforcement troops came at dawn, dropping from their ships in powered armor that made them look like metallic giants. They moved in perfect formation toward the pack's current den, expecting to find primitive creatures who would scatter at the first show of advanced technology. Instead, they found organized resistance. Rebecca had taught the pack about human military tactics over the past weeks. The Thyrex, in turn, had shown her how to move silently through the forest, how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to strike from concealment and fade away before the enemy could respond. The battle was chaos. Energy weapons flashed blue-white between the silver trees while Thyrix hunters moved like shadows, appearing long enough to strike before vanishing back into the forest. Rebecca coordinated the defense from a hidden position, using her knowledge of council procedures to predict their movements. For a while, it seemed like they might actually win. The enforcement troops were trained for dealing with colonial riots and space pirates, not guerrilla warfare in alien forests. Several of them had already been wounded and their formation was beginning to break apart. Then the explosion started. Frustrated by the resistance, the council troops began setting demolition charges at key points around the forest. Not to kill, but to create controlled collapses that would force the Thyrix into the open where they could be captured more easily. The first charge brought down a section of cliff face near the old-growth trees. The second sealed off the main escape route through the canyon. The third went off too close to the den where Diana was sheltering with the youngest cubs. The explosion shook the ground like an earthquake. When the dust cleared, Rebecca saw that half the cliff had collapsed, completely blocking the entrance to the den. Diana and 3 cubs were trapped inside with no way out. She could hear Diana's desperate howls from behind the wall of rock and debris. The cubs were crying too, high frightened sounds that cut through all the noise of battle. Smoke was beginning to seep through the gaps in the rubble. Marcus appeared beside Rebecca, bleeding from multiple wounds, his eyes wild with panic. He clawed frantically at the stones, but they were too heavy for even his great strength to move. His family was dying behind that wall and he could not reach them. Rebecca studied the collapsed entrance with trained eyes. There was a gap near the top, narrow but possibly large enough for someone smaller than a Thyrix to squeeze through. "I can fit," she said. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "The opening. I'm small enough to get through. I can reach them." Without waiting for his permission, Rebecca began climbing the pile of debris. Sharp stones cut her hands and knees, but she forced herself upward toward the narrow gap. Behind her, she heard Marcus calling her name in his own language. It was the first time he had ever used it. Rebecca squeezed through the opening, ignoring the pain as rocks scraped against her ribs and back. Inside the collapsed den, smoke and dust made it hard to see or breathe. But she could hear Diana and the cubs somewhere in the darkness ahead. She found them huddled in the deepest part of the den, Diana's body shielding the 3 youngest cubs from falling debris. When the female Thyrix saw Rebecca emerge from the shadows, her golden eyes went wide with amazement and desperate hope. "I'm here to help," Rebecca gasped through the choking dust. One by one, she carried the cubs back to the narrow opening and passed them through to Marcus's waiting arms. The youngest was no bigger than a human baby, its soft fur gray with dust and fear. Diana came last, barely managing to squeeze her larger frame through the gap that Rebecca had widened by scraping away loose stones until her fingers bled. As they emerged into daylight, Rebecca realized the battle had ended. The council troops had withdrawn, but it was not victory. It was merely a pause. They would return with heavier weapons, more soldiers, orders to use lethal force. But something fundamental had changed during the rescue. As Rebecca caught her breath and tended to her wounds, she felt small forms pressing against her legs. The cubs she had just saved were clustering around her, seeking comfort from her presence instead of fleeing to their parents. Marcus and Diana stood watching with expressions Rebecca could not read. In all of Thyrix history, their cubs had never approached an outsider willingly. The ceremony began 3 days after the battle. Rebecca had never seen the sacred grove before. The pack had kept this place hidden from her during all their months together. Ancient silver trees formed a perfect circle, their branches creating a natural roof above the forest floor. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in patterns that seemed almost magical. The entire pack had gathered, not just Marcus's family group but elder Thyrix from across the territory. Rebecca counted nearly 20 adults, more than she had ever seen in one place. They sat in a formal circle with her at the center, their golden eyes solemn and watchful. Rebecca had no idea what was happening, but she could feel the importance of the moment in every breath. The air itself seemed heavy with meaning. The eldest among them, a female whose silver markings covered most of her muzzle and face, stepped forward. The ancient Thyrix spoke in the most formal dialect Rebecca had ever heard. The words were different from everyday speech, older and more complex. Even with her improved language skills, she could only catch fragments of meaning. Honor. Protection. Cubs. Future. Sacred trust. Marcus moved to Rebecca's side and began translating into English, though his words came slowly as he searched for the right meanings. "She says you have proven the greatest virtue of our people. 3 times you saved cubs who were not your own blood. 3 times you risked death for our future generations. This makes you worthy of the highest honor we can give. What honor? Rebecca asked softly. Diana approached from the other side, her voice gentle as she spoke in careful English. The word is Kithara. In your language, it means guardian of tomorrow. Protector of continuation. No outsider has ever been granted this title. The ceremony continued with exchanges Rebecca did not understand. The elders passed objects between them, spoke in voices that carried the weight of centuries. She caught words here and there. Bloodline. Family. Trust. Sacred bond. Then the cubs were brought forward. Not just Diana's cubs, whom Rebecca had rescued from the collapsed den. All the cubs in the pack. They approached without fear, their tiny hands reaching out to touch her arms and legs. The smallest ones climbed onto her lap as if they had done it 1,000 times before. The ancient elder placed something warm around Rebecca's neck. It was a pendant carved from what looked like Thyric's fang, inlaid with silver metal that gleamed in the filtered sunlight. The moment it touched her skin, Rebecca felt something change. Not physically, but deeper than that. Like a door opening in her heart. You are packed now, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Not by birth, but by choice. By sacrifice. By proving you would die to protect our young. Our cubs know you as family. You have the right of guardianship. Tears ran down Rebecca's face as she understood what was happening. Among the Thyrics, nothing was more sacred than the care of their young. Cubs were the future of their species, protected above all else. No outsider had ever been trusted with such responsibility. The youngest cub in the pack, barely old enough to walk without stumbling, toddled over and climbed into Rebecca's arms. Its tiny hands patted her cheeks while it made soft churring sounds of contentment. The sound that meant safety. Home. Love. Diana settled beside them, and for the first time since they had met, Rebecca was allowed to remain close while the cubs played and nursed. She was no longer watching from the outside. She was part of the family circle. What happens now? Rebecca asked, watching as more cubs gathered around her legs, drawn by curiosity and the acceptance their parents had granted. Marcus looked up at the sky, where council ships still patrolled beyond the atmosphere like metal vultures. Now we prepare for what comes next. They will return with more soldiers, bigger weapons. But they do not understand what they face now. What do you mean? They think we are animals to be captured and caged, Diana said, her English growing stronger with each conversation. They do not know we have chosen a human as pack sister. They do not know this human has chosen us as family worth dying for. The ancient elder spoke again, and this time Rebecca caught more of the meaning. She was talking about alliances, about messages being sent to other packs across the moon. The rescue of the cubs had become more than just one act of heroism. It had become a symbol that was spreading through Thyric society. Other packs wanted to meet the human who had been granted Kithara status. They wanted to see for themselves this outsider who would risk everything for cubs not her own. Some were traveling for days just to witness what many thought was impossible. As the ceremony concluded, Rebecca found herself surrounded by cubs who seemed reluctant to leave her side. The smallest one had fallen asleep in her arms, its tiny body completely relaxed and trusting. Its mother watched with calm approval, no longer worried about her baby's safety with the human. They smell it on you now, Marcus explained, seeing her confusion. The scent of guardianship. Other packs will recognize it from miles away. They will know you are family to us. That night, as the pack settled down to sleep around their fire, Rebecca lay with cubs curled against her side like living blankets. Their soft breathing and tiny heartbeats created a rhythm that felt like home. Diana's youngest, the one she had pulled from the collapsed den, pressed its face against her neck and made the deep churring sound that meant perfect contentment. It was a sound Rebecca had never heard directed at an outsider before. For the first time since her shuttle had crashed on Corvanis, Rebecca felt truly at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats from the council forces. But tonight, surrounded by her chosen family, she was exactly where she belonged. The pendant around her neck grew warm against her skin, as if responding to her emotions. She was Kithara now. Guardian of tomorrow. Protector of the future. She was home. 6 months had passed since Rebecca became Kithara, and the forest moon of Corvanis looked completely different. Where once there had been only wilderness, now a beautiful stone platform rose from the forest floor. The landing pad was built from local materials using both human engineering and Thyric's craftsmanship. It was a symbol of what two species could create together. Rebecca stood at the edge of the platform, watching cubs play in the morning sunlight. The games they played now mixed traditional Thyrex hunting practice with human concepts she had taught them. The youngest ones, born after her adoption into the pack, called her by a special name that meant second mother in their language. "The ships are coming," Marcus said, approaching with confident steps. His English was now perfect after months of practice. Around his neck he wore the silver markings that showed he was both pack leader and official representative of his people. It was a title that would have been impossible before Rebecca's arrival. Through the trees, Rebecca could see the gleaming hulls of council diplomatic vessels. These were not the military ships from months ago, but elegant craft reserved for meeting newly recognized civilizations. The change had taken months of careful negotiations and several political miracles. Diana approached carrying their newest cub, born just 2 months earlier. The infant was special in ways that amazed scientists across the galaxy. Its fur grew in patterns that reminded everyone of human hair, and its eyes held colors that existed in neither pure Thyrex nor human genetics. The discovery that their species could produce hybrid offspring had changed everything. "Are you ready for this?" Diana asked, switching easily between Thyrex and English as she always did now. Rebecca touched the ceremonial pendant around her neck. The original fang carving was now joined by additional honors from packs across Corvanis. She had become something that had never existed before, a human recognized as Thyrex nobility, a bridge between two worlds. "As ready as anyone can be for making history," she replied. The council delegation landed with great ceremony. Ambassador Thompson emerged from the lead ship wearing the expression diplomats used when dealing with situations that did not fit their training manuals. Behind him came specialists in alien cultures, trade representatives, and media crews recording everything for the galactic networks. They had expected to negotiate with a primitive species that needed guidance joining galactic civilization. Instead, they found Rebecca walking hand in hand with Thyrex cubs while Marcus and Diana stood beside her as equals. The newest cub, the hybrid baby, rode comfortably on her shoulders and occasionally tugged at her hair with tiny fingers. "Dr. Hayes," Ambassador Thompson said carefully, his eyes taking in the scene with obvious confusion. "This is quite unexpected." "Many things are unexpected when you take time to understand them, Ambassador," Rebecca replied calmly. "Let me introduce Pack Leader Marcus and his mate Diana, chosen representatives of the Thyrex Coalition." The formal negotiations took place in a great hall the packs had built specifically for this meeting. Rebecca served as translator and cultural advisor, but it quickly became clear that the Thyrex could represent themselves perfectly well. They had spent months preparing detailed proposals for trade agreements, territorial rights, and cultural exchange programs. What shocked the council delegation most was how completely integrated Rebecca had become. Cubs climbed on her during important meetings. Adult Thyrex asked her opinion on political matters. She participated in hunts, led educational sessions, and had helped develop new technologies that combine human science with Thyrex craftsmanship. "This level of integration is remarkable," Dr. Sarah Chen, the delegation's chief scientist, whispered during a break. "How did you achieve something like this? It is completely unprecedented in our records." Rebecca looked across the hall where Marcus was patiently answering questions from curious council representatives. Diana supervised a group of cubs who were demonstrating traditional games for the visitors. The smallest cub, her cub she realized with a warm feeling, was sleeping peacefully in a carrier on her back. "I stopped trying to study them like specimens and started learning from them as people," she said simply. "I proved that I would protect what they valued most. Everything else happened naturally." The final ceremony took place as the sun set behind the silver trees. The council formally recognized the Thyrex coalition as a sovereign government with full rights to their territory. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchange programs were established, and Rebecca was officially appointed as the first human Thyrex ambassador. But the moment that mattered most to Rebecca came later, when the formal delegations had left and she sat with her pack around the evening fire. Cubs clustered around her as she read from a human storybook, translating the words into Thyrex as she went along. Marcus settled beside her with his youngest cub, a little one who had never known a world where Rebecca was not family, curled between them like a bridge connecting two species. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked quietly. "Your old life among your own kind?" Rebecca looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight. Diana was grooming one of the older cubs while the ancient elder taught proper hunting postures to the younger ones. The adult hunters discussed tomorrow's plans in voices full of respect for each other's opinions. Her family. Not by blood or species, but by choice and commitment and love that transcended all boundaries. "These are my people," she said, then repeated it in perfect Thyrex. "This is my pack." The hybrid cub in her lap yawned and pressed closer to her warmth, completely trusting and completely safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to build bridges between worlds. But tonight, Rebecca was exactly where she belonged. She had come to Corvanis to study aliens and learned what it truly meant to be human. She had found her family among the stars, and in doing so, had helped create something entirely new. A future where different species could become one family through understanding, sacrifice, and love. The pendant around her neck grew warm as if responding to her thoughts. She was Kithara, guardian of tomorrow, protector of all cubs regardless of their species. She was home.